Who is the featherweight GOAT? For a little while now, one of the hottest and often divisive debates in the mixed martial arts world has been who is the greatest featherweight of all time. And in particular, this discussion has really blazed around the internet and via social media whenever Alexander Volkanovski is getting ready to compete. Is it the current reigning UFC champion, or does the legendary and long-reigning ex-champ Jose Aldo still deserve the GOAT title? Does the man who ended Aldo's initial run as champ, Mr. Conor McGregor, have a claim at all? Or is it the man who ruled the UFC's featherweight division for several years as the Aldo era wrapped up, Max Blessed Holloway? And is there even a point talking about this anymore, following Volkanovski's head-turning performance at UFC 290? Well, before we dive into this hot topic, a quick reminder that if you enjoy this video, please make sure to like it and to subscribe to KO Central MMA. And don't be shy about sharing your own thoughts about who's the featherweight GOAT in the comment section. Alrighty, with that out of the way, let's get into it. Jose Aldo. If you're an old-school MMA fan, you know that for years there was no question about who the greatest featherweight ever was. And if you even challenged the argument that Jose Aldo was the best 145er the game had ever seen, you'd immediately be accused of trolling. That's how unanimous the argument Aldo as the GOAT was. After all, back in 2013 and 2014, amidst Aldo's first run as the UFC's featherweight champ, he was a man who hadn't lost a fight since 2005. Before moving over to the UFC with the WEC merger, Aldo had buzzed the MMA galaxy by destroying the likes of Cub Swanson, Mike Brown, Manny Gamburian, and Uriah Faber. The win over Faber in particular, while it wasn't a stoppage, drew widespread praise as Aldo battered the rising star for 5 rounds. Aldo continued to dominate in the UFC from 2011 through 2014 and defeated another round of elite featherweights in the likes of Chad Mendes, Frankie Edgar, and Chan Sung Jung. So by the time Aldo was booked to fight the sport's newest phenomenon at the time, Conor McGregor, not only was Aldo routinely mentioned as the featherweight GOAT, many believed he had an argument for the greatest ever, period. No matter what weight class you're talking about. The king of Rio's outstanding boxing, nasty leg kicks, and awe-inspiring takedown defense was a combination the sport had rarely seen. Now, unless you're brand new to MMA, you know that Aldo's storied reign as the featherweight king came to a vicious, crashing halt via a booming left hand from McGregor in 2015. Following McGregor's departure from the featherweight division, Aldo did secure the interim title 1 year later in 2016 by defeating Edgar again, and eventually the UFC changed that title to the undisputed one. But the Brazilian star ran into Max Holloway not long after, and the Aldo era at featherweight remained part of history. Despite the fact Aldo was no longer considered the best featherweight in the sport, his case for being the featherweight GOAT remained strong. In fact, just last September, Volkanovski himself was still referring to the legend as the greatest 145er to date. I still have him as the featherweight GOAT just because what he's done for the sport. So many defenses and stuff like that. I'm coming for that status. I'll be honest, I'm coming for it. But yeah, he's got it. He's the man. He brought a lot of us into the sport. I still remember watching him before I even started, and he was still competitive until now. Still right at the top. Crazy legacy. A lot of times I think of how many times people thought he was done and dusted. He'd have a loss and then come back and just kick ass again and still look just as fast as ever. The reasons why everyone loves him so much is he's talented, very technical, skilled, but he's very respectful. A true martial artist is what he is, a true martial artist. Yup, there's no question Aldo did plenty of dusting during his storied reign, and if you're wondering, he defended the WEC and UFC featherweight title 9 times. Most fighters struggle to win 9 fights in a row in the UFC period, much less do so against the best of the division. If you included all of Aldo's wins, by the time he battled McGregor at UFC 194, he'd won 18 straight fights. That's GOAT-worthy stuff, no question. Conor McGregor. Now, if you make your GOAT determinations based on winning streaks, title defenses, and quality of opposition, then yeah, you're probably scoffing right now at McGregor's name even getting mentioned here. Some folks have argued, and they're typically massive McGregor fans, that the polarizing star deserves to be considered because he bombed out Aldo in just 13 seconds. In other words, he was the man who beat the man. Further, they'll cite the fact that McGregor defeated top fighters like Dustin Poirier, Chad Mendes, and Holloway en route to his title fight with Aldo. But the facts remain that McGregor never defended the UFC's featherweight title as he moved up to lightweight and welterweight and never competed at 145 pounds again. So, for GOAT purists, McGregor's case for the GOAT compared to Aldo's, Holloway's, and Volkanovski's is pretty weak. Max Holloway. So, now we've arrived to Max Holloway and his case as the GOAT, which largely stems from the Blessed era. How long the Blessed era lasts depends on who you talk to. For some, the era began in 2014 and went through 2019, which saw Holloway win 13 straight and defeat multiple all-star fighters, including the GOAT contender, Aldo, not once, but twice. Others see the Blessed era matching Holloway's featherweight championship reign, which began in 2016 and ended with his late 2019 loss to Volkanovski. All that aside, during the last decade or so, there's no question that Holloway established himself as one of the greatest fighters of his generation. After all, the Hawaiian has racked up victories over stars and notable opposition like Brian Ortega, Charles Oliveira, Anthony Pettis, Frankie Edgar, Yair Rodriguez, Calvin Kattar, Arnold Allen, and yes, the aforementioned Aldo. So, on account of that list, his title reign, and his jaw-dropping boxing skills, many people have called Holloway the GOAT at some juncture. Further, some argued that because Holloway stopped Aldo 2 different times, when Aldo was still technically in his prime years and far from washed, that this was evidence Holloway was the best 145er to date. In fact, during Holloway's reign, he was routinely called the GOAT, albeit a lot of the time it was in UFC broadcasts. But despite his successes and wins over Aldo, Holloway never thought his resume bested the legends. Case in point, in June 2022, Blessed said this about the Brazilian. "It's cool I've got the wins, but the title defenses are the title defenses," Holloway said. "That is the actual record. He got 8 title wins, I got 5. We're not that far behind him. Hopefully I can catch him, we'll see what happens. He's the GOAT, bro, you can't take that away." Just because he got gifted it, the event that the UFC bought out and he was the champion, it wasn't a gift. I'm sure if they told him, "Hey, you've got to fight for the belt," he would have fought for the belt. That's just the kind of guy Aldo is. Stand-up guy, hard worker, and hard fighter, and the GOAT. Whether you think Holloway is the GOAT or not, no one can question that the future Hall of Famer is one of the most humble, respectful fighters in the game. But if you buy into the logic that Holloway's wins over Aldo make his case as the GOAT stronger, how do you reconcile that with Blessed's losses to Volk? That's a tough one, right? Alexander Volkanovski. Finally, we arrive at the current featherweight king and Volkanovski's case as the greatest featherweight of all time. And we'll take a look at the champ, fresh off his ridiculously impressive stoppage of Yair Rodriguez at UFC 290. So, is recency bias at play here? It very well could be, sure. But to be fair, there were a lot of people calling Volkanovski the GOAT well before UFC 290 went down. For several years now, Volkanovski's widely been regarded as one of the best fighters in the solar system. The Australian star was riding a 17-fight winning streak when he battled Holloway for the first time in 2019, and Volk was coming off a clear-cut decision win over the legendary Aldo. From a tactical standpoint, Volkanovski has showcased brilliant striking, coupled with solid wrestling and vicious ground and pound. But talk that Volk could be and or is the GOAT didn't really make inroads until he defeated Holloway for the 3rd time in June 2022. A key reason being that Volk's second victory over Blessed in 2020 was by split decision, and a lot of people scored that fight for Holloway. So, due to that, and because Volkanovski hadn't defended the featherweight crown multiple times, many argued he still had some work to do still before reaching GOAT status. Well, Volkanovski continued to put in the work, as by the time he faced Holloway for the 3rd time, the renowned fighter had defended the title against Brian Ortega and the Korean Zombie. Further, mountains of praise were sent Volk's way after he narrowly lost via decision to the current lightweight king, Islam Makhachev. Although Volkanovski lost that fight, Many believe it demonstrated he is one of the best, if not the best, pound-for-pound fighter in the sport. So, as Volkanovski prepared for his 5th title defense at UFC 290, many observers opined that a victory over Rodriguez would entrench the star as the featherweight GOAT. Case in point, here's what former champ Henry Cejudo had to say prior to the event. "Where does a win like this put Alexander Volkanovski?" Cejudo said. "Where would you rank him? Would he eventually beat out a guy like Jose Aldo?" My answer, guys, is 100%. Not only has he beaten Aldo, but he's gonna surpass his record through numbers. And in the fashion that he's been doing it, he's been putting out the people who have put out Aldo. He's done a tremendous job, and what's missing for Alexander Volkanovski after this fight is potentially another belt or another shot at 155 pounds. There you have it. Do you agree with Cejudo? Did Volkanovski seal the deal in terms of being the featherweight GOAT at UFC 290? Ultimately, whether you think Volk is the GOAT likely depends on how much stock you put in the length of title reigns, and how you view the fact that Aldo lost to both Holloway and him. Aldo sat atop the featherweight division longer than Holloway, and it remains to be seen if Volkanovski can match his championship run. As noted, the King of Rio defended the UFC title 7 times and the WEC crown twice. But would Prime Aldo beat Prime Volkanovski? From what we've seen, it's hard to say yes, and the current champ beat Prime Holloway at least twice, depending on how you scored their 2020 bout, of course. Further, as it stands right now, it's hard to imagine Volkanovski's reign at featherweight coming to a close anytime soon. Unless, of course, he vacates the belt to pursue the lightweight crown again. But what do you think? Has Volk established himself as the featherweight GOAT? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like this video and subscribe to KO Central MMA.